I came home for my grandpa's 80th expecting family laughter, maybe a candle still burning. Instead, I opened the door to silence. He was sitting in his wheelchair by the window, shoulders trembling, a chocolate cake collapsing on the counter, frosting sliding off like time itself melting away. And on the fridge, a note scrawled in haste. I took your $20K. No explanation, no shame. Just a betrayal taped to cold metal. That was the moment I realized this wasn't neglect, it was strategy. They thought I wouldn't come. They thought I wouldn't fight back. But when they returned smiling with their fake balloons and store-bought cupcakes, they had no idea. Because by then, I had already taken everything back. My name is Zephyr Maddox. I'm about to share something close to my heart, and before I do, can you say hi in the comments or tell me where you're from? I love hearing how far my story reaches. Sometimes knowing someone is listening makes all the difference. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. And if my story touches you, please hit subscribe. It's free, but it means the world. It tells me I'm not alone in this, and it helps this story reach others who've been silenced, just like me. I came back to Bozeman because I promised Grandpa the spring before he stopped remembering afternoons. I told him I'd be there for his 80th, and that was enough to book a flight and drive across the valley. When I pushed open the back door, a gasket of cold air met me, and the house smelled like lemon oil and old wood, the kind of smell that keeps a past from fading, but doesn't mend what broke in it. I called Grandpa, and the sound of my voice bounced off cabinets and settled into silence. In the kitchen, he sat in his wheelchair facing the window, shoulders small and trembling, the light catching dust in a way that made the room look half-finished. On the counter, a chocolate cake had collapsed on itself, blue frosting sloughing down the side like something melting away on purpose, and a single deflated balloon clung to the cabinet with scotch tape. When I wrapped the shawl I had bought at a market in Tampa over his knees, he smiled weakly and said, "You came." The smile was so small I felt it like an accusation. I boiled water and put on an old record. The needle popped and a tired saxophone filled the house where voices should have been. On the fridge there was a scrap of paper taped crooked. Borrowed the funds, $20,000 from the joint account. Will return. The handwriting was hurried and corporate, the kind of note you'd see in an office, not on a family's refrigerator. I took out my phone and logged into the joint account we set up when his care got serious. For months I had been sending money into that account. I watched the screen show a rhythm of small withdrawals over the last 3 weeks that summed to roughly $20,000 paid out in increments to the same payee name that read like a business, a legacy consulting line that made my stomach drop. I sliced the cake with hands steady from practice and placed a slice on a plate. He closed his eyes when I set it in front of him and murmured, "They said they'd be right back." And the words arrived like a shrug that wanted me to accept what I saw as normal. I asked, "Where are they?" He looked at the window past the trees and said, "They had errands. Said they'd come after." The answer had the hollow of something rehearsed. I walked the hallway and noticed the frames photos taken at graduations and early summers, none of them recent, held me in them. There was an empty gap in the most recent family portrait, a blank where I once stood in an older frame, as if whoever set up that shot had decided I didn't belong in their story anymore. Standing there, I felt the room get colder. This wasn't neglect. It was a plan unpacked in polite gestures. I opened the top drawer of the kitchen hutch because Grandpa had once said, "If anything ever looks wrong, open the top one. You'll find the things that matter." And beneath a stack of old coupons and bingo tickets, I found the first real shard, a small shoebox softened at the corners with a faded Polaroid on top of it, me on his lap from when I was 6, a crooked crayon happy birthday with my bad spelling, and a locket with one side empty as if something had been taken out. Underneath the photos was a printed draft of a co-ownership agreement with our names typed plainly, Tamsin E. Maddox and Walter R. Maddox, and a series of notes in his hand about taxes and maintenance dated before the fog of forgetfulness fell. The draft had no notarization, just hope, and his script. My phone buzzed while I scanned transactions and took pictures, a social post from the Granite Peak Event Center, honoring Walter Maddox, with a glossy photo of Colton and Sable smiling with flowers, the event marked as yesterday. I pulled the bag from the porch and found a folded flyer that matched the glowing post. The irony hit like frost. Yesterday they posed for cameras, while today he sat with only the knitting of a shawl to keep him warm. I started taking everything down: photos, the paper on the fridge, the withdrawals, the flyer, each screenshot stamped with time and place. I made a folder on my phone and labeled it Truth BZN. The pulse in my throat steadied into a plan. This wasn't a mistake you fixed with sympathy. It was a series of decisions that had pushed him into solitude and my name out of the family narrative. My hands were steady enough to record a short clip of him saying my name so I could prove he recognized me, and I logged the account activity with timestamps. I didn't scream. I didn't confront empty air. I collected evidence the way you gather warm firewood in a storm, because you need a way to keep someone from freezing. When night came, I sat on the stoop under a row of birch, and the sky tasted like tin. The house behind me held the scent of sugar and old jazz and shame. I knew in my bones now this was deliberate, not mere forgetfulness. Grandpa had told me months ago to check the top drawer if things looked wrong. I closed the shoebox, and before I turned off the porch light, I slid open the drawer of his bedside table and found the note he'd left for me in a handwriting grown faint. If you ever believe they have made the house a stage, find the papers. My phone buzzed again, an anonymous text. Meet tonight. I have messages from within. I looked out at the dark trees, felt the valley hold its breath, and thought, they think I won't come. They think they erased me. They are wrong. I didn't go to bed that night. I set the photos under a lamp and began sorting through the shoebox as if each scrap would explain the decision to keep him alone. The Polaroids were soft at the edges and smelled like attic dust. One showed me asleep on his shoulder. Another showed a younger Sable with a wide, practiced smile in a newspaper clipping about community service. Underneath the pictures, wrapped in tissue, was a creased copy of a co-ownership draft that had his handwriting in the margins, notes about lawn, dock repairs, split livable area, that placed my name beside his as the intended co-owner. There was no notary stamp, but the dates were from years before the fog arrived. I took a picture of everything, labeled each file with the apparent date and the scanner's metadata, then added them to Truth BZN. The box had a second secret, a locket with one side missing its photograph. That empty half felt like space I had been pushed into for years, a deliberate erasure. When I tossed the shoebox into my canvas tote, I saw a brittle clipping from the paper folded beneath Sable and Colton Revive Family Legacy at Granite Peak Event Center, a feature written in that bright paragraph tone that makes forgiveness sound like virtue. The accompanying photo was staged Colton with a hand on his father's shoulder, Sable beaming in pearls. I cross-referenced the event date with social posts and found their album glossy and full of comments praising their dedication. It was all furnace glamour on top of absence. The next discovery came from the trash by the side door, an advertising fold for the Honoring Walter luncheon at Granite Peak dated the day before I arrived. Whoever threw it out had been careful enough to delete the man out of the photos in public, but careless enough to leave the flyer to rot in his own yard. I sat on the porch steps and opened Facebook on my phone. The event had a full album, and in none of the images, no table shots, no selfies, was I tagged or even present. The captions read like an epitaph written by publicists, a beautiful tribute to a beloved pillar. The contradiction sharpened. They wore their virtue for cameras and left him for a kitchen. I started a timeline on my laptop, stacking evidence like cards, the co-ownership draft printed before decline, the social posts dated yesterday, the withdrawals tied to a business name I didn't recognize. The draft showed ink smudges and a margin where someone's fountain pen had been tested. The blot matched the pen sitting in a jar on the desk in the study, the same jar I remembered Colton using when he came to check on things. That small matching blot felt like a finder planting a flag. The draft itself, though not notarized, proved intention. Intention on paper can become motive in court if you can show it was once real and then systematically erased. I copied the draft into a PDF, embedded the photo metadata, and sent it to an old lawyer I remembered from when Grandpa had first talked about estate plans, Harold Cho in Billings. While waiting, my phone buzzed again. Griffin Sable's son texted, "I can't believe it. Mom said to unfriend you." I saw them in the car. They were laughing about the plan. I called him. He was 17, and his voice was a low tremor. "I didn't want to, Zeph. They told me to tell people you were being dramatic. I overheard them in the truck. Make sure she can't come back. We'll own it." I didn't know what it meant. He sent me a screenshot of a group chat where Sable's name appeared alongside messages that read like a script. "Let her be the martyr. We'll handle the rest." The words were cold and practical. The plan read like a spreadsheet. I saved the screenshots, recorded the timestamps, and told Griffin to keep his head down and to leave his phone on his nightstand. If they asked, he'd say nothing. The moment I put down the phone, Harold called. He remembered me, then hesitated when I said my name as if I'd been a rumor. "They told me you moved away," he said. He had an old draft, he told me, a version of the trust where my name was explicit. He promised to email what he had. His pause at the end of the sentence was a warning. "Somewhere around 4 years ago," he said slowly, "there's a record of a release form signed digitally. It removed a name. If there was a document, it's possible someone filed a release without your consent." I could hear the gears in the phone as he typed me an address. That was the first real legal crack. A paper trail might be insufficient if forged, but forging itself becomes a crime with witnesses. My plan refined itself in my head like a map. I needed witnesses, timestamps, and the kind of documentation that doesn't disappear when a PR account spins a narrative. I made a checklist: scan the draft and lock it, hash every image, save copies of the Granite Peak album, get Griffin to screenshot the chat on his phone and forward it to an email I controlled, preserve the bank logs, and above all, get Harold's copy into my hands. The house groaned around me in its old way, as if the walls were keeping their own counsel. I boxed up the shoebox and the clipping and slid them under my arm. The wind picked up, ringing the birches like bells. My phone chimed with a new message. "Meet behind the Miller's Mill at midnight. I have more." The sender was anonymous, the kind of invitation that either leads to evidence or a trap. I stood and stared at the dark line of trees, at the halo of the porch light, and felt an old certainty tighten in my chest. They had replaced my presence with a narrative, staged a legacy, and thought that would be enough to erase the work I'd done and the grief I'd given all these years. They were wrong. I had the draft, the locket, the flyer, the screenshots, and a teen willing to tell the truth quietly. I hashed files and uploaded them to a cloud folder with an email timestamp, because when someone erases you, they often do it in public. I needed to make sure my evidence wasn't just in my hands. I put on my coat, left the shoebox in my tote, and walked into a night that felt like a decision. The porch light was the only glow cutting through the October mist when I heard the quick shuffle of sneakers against the gravel. A figure in a wet hoodie hesitated at the bottom step, hands stuffed in the pocket, head down like he wasn't sure he should be here at all. I opened the door and whispered, "Griffin." He looked up, eyes darting past me toward the kitchen window before nodding quickly. 17 years old and shaking, he smelled of rain and cold. "Mom told me to unfriend you," he blurted, words rushing as if he had rehearsed them. "She said you were trying to take something that wasn't yours." I believed her for a while. His shoulders hunched, the hood dripping onto the porch floor. But tonight I heard them talking. I saw something. He pulled out his phone, unlocked it with trembling fingers, and showed me a screenshot of a group chat. The names weren't disguised enough. A contact labeled C. Merritt wrote, "Make sure he's not in the way anymore." Another S. Merritt answered, "Let him play the victim. We'll own the estate either way." The words cut clean, stripped of pretense. My throat tightened, but I kept my voice steady. "Send it to me." He nodded, and I filmed the screen with my own phone, narrating the time, the sender, the chain, because chain of custody matters when family decides to treat you like an intruder. "Do you know what they meant?" I asked. Griffin shifted in his damp hoodie. "I heard Mom mention a reverse mortgage. Said once it's signed, the house is theirs. That's why they set the meeting tomorrow morning." His words carried both fear and relief, as if speaking them had lifted a weight. I thanked him and told him to keep his head down. He nodded again, guilt flickering across his face. "I'm sorry I believed them," he whispered, then slipped back into the mist. I closed the door and sat at the kitchen table where the old lamp hummed against the silence. I opened my laptop, dragged the screenshots into the Truth BZN folder, and labeled them with the exact time Griffin left the porch. It was past midnight when I dialed the number I still had scribbled in an old notebook. Harold Cho, the estate attorney my grandfather had consulted before the fog crept in. The line crackled. "This is Harold." I introduced myself. There was a pause. then a soft sigh. I haven't heard that name in years. They told me you were gone. His tone grew cautious when I asked about earlier drafts of the trust. You were listed. Years ago. Then 4 years back, a digital release came across my desk. Said you'd signed away any claim. I archived it. My pulse quickened. I never signed anything. My words came sharper than I intended. Silence stretched. Then Harold said, "That's what I thought." The signature looked electronic, attached with a platform they used. No witnesses. I'll send you the draft with your name and the logs of the change. It's thin, but it's something. I pressed record on my phone to capture every word. "Mr. Cho, I need you to confirm when you send it time-stamped." He agreed, then added, "If they're pushing a reverse mortgage, you'll want someone versed in elder law. What they're doing, it's not just bad faith. It's abuse." After hanging up, I wrote Marina Cortez a message flagged, "Urgent need counsel at 9 a.m. reverse mortgage attempt. Please stand by for video call." I listed the documents I had collected: the $20K note, the group chat, the co-ownership draft, the flyer from Granite Peak, the bank withdrawals, the photos with my face scrubbed out. I built a checklist for the morning: confirm the notary record, the process, request ID, verify capacity, involve Marina. My phone chimed once more, an email from Harold with an attachment: draft DACA Trust, 2009.pdf. I didn't open it yet. I only checked the metadata, saved a backup to the cloud, and encrypted a copy. At 1:42 a.m., a notification buzzed across the screen. Appointment confirmed, Janine Co. Notary, 9:00 a.m. I stared at the time. My laptop fan hummed softly, the house ticking like it was listening. I plugged in my phone, turned on the voice recorder, and left it running as I leaned back. Morning was only hours away, and they believed they had a clean window to finish their plan. But I was already awake. The knock at 8:55 was crisp and punctual, the sound of someone used to walking into kitchens and leaving signatures that changed lives. I opened the door to find a woman in a navy suit, portfolio in hand, her expression professional but polite. "Janine Co. Notary," she said. I smiled thinly, stepped aside, and gestured toward the table where the kettle hissed. The air outside carried the last bite of Montana frost seeping through the threshold. "Before we begin," I said calmly, "may I see your identification?" She blinked, then retrieved her license, handing it to me with a practiced motion. I set my phone flat on the table recording app. Open camera tilted just enough to capture the documents. For transparency, I added, "Every step will be documented." Her brows pinched slightly, but she nodded. I poured tea into 2 chipped mugs and placed one before her, the steam curling between us. She opened her case and spread the paperwork across the table, neatly clipped forms, a pen laid horizontally like an invitation. Grandpa sat in his chair by the window, wrapped in the shawl, blinking slowly as though trying to recognize the woman in front of him. Janine leaned toward him with a professional smile. "We met last month, sir. You signed preliminary documents. Today is just to finalize." Grandpa tilted his head, his voice thin but steady. "I don't remember signing anything." The air thickened. I glanced at the papers and saw his name already scribbled on one of the lines, the letters shaky off-center, the ink pooling where his hand must have trembled or where someone had traced it. My stomach turned. I lifted the page, holding it toward the light. "This looks recent. Do you recall the day this was signed?" Grandpa shook his head, eyes watering. "I never signed that." Janine hesitated, fingers brushing the edges of her file. Before she could reply, my phone chimed, and Marina's voice spilled from the speaker. "This is Attorney Cortez. I'm joining as an observer. Please continue." Janine's composure faltered, caught off guard by the unseen witness. Marina's voice sharpened. "If the signer doesn't remember the document, if capacity is unclear, you cannot proceed. It would violate notary standards and could constitute elder financial abuse." The room went still, except for the kettle's fading hiss. Janine's hands froze above the paperwork. She closed the file slowly, her shoulders dropping. She exhaled. "For the record, I was contacted not by Mr. Maddox, but by Tyler Grady, loan officer. He assured me the family approved." I kept my tone steady. "Tyler works with Colton, correct?" She nodded reluctantly. I tapped the forged signature. "This needs to be reported." This isn't a valid process. Janine packed her case, her face tight but professional. I can't continue. But you should know they'll try again with someone else. This isn't over. She stood, tea untouched, and walked to the door. The handle clicked, and for a moment I felt the relief of a storm delayed. But as she stepped onto the porch, the side door opened. Colton walked in, sunglasses dangling from his shirt collar, grinning like he owned the house already. "Forgot my shades," he said, eyes darting from me to the table where the paperwork still lay half exposed. His smile widened as he saw Janine's retreating figure. "Looks like I missed the party." The air in the room shifted. I slid the forged page back into the folder, tucked my phone closer, and steadied my breath. The kettle was silent now, the tea cooling. Colton's shadow stretched across the floorboards, and I knew the morning had only begun. Colton leaned against the doorframe like he owned it, sunlight bouncing off his watch as though he wanted me to notice. He scanned the room, then smirked at the stack of papers Janine had left behind. Still camping out in the living room doesn't feel strange staying in a place you barely know anymore. His tone was casual, rehearsed, a little cruel. I didn't bother answering. Instead, I slid the file across the table toward him, the forged signature page glinting faintly in the afternoon light. This signature. Want to tell me how Grandpa supposedly signed something he swears he never saw? He raised an eyebrow, picked up the sheet, and gave a lazy shrug. "Who's going to believe you? I'm here every day. You're just a name on a wire transfer from Texas. People see me taking care of him, showing up at church with him doing the errands. You're a ghost who comes back to stir up drama." I tapped the phone, still recording, on the table, its red light blinking like a metronome. "Everything you just said and more has been captured. The notary herself admitted she was contacted by your loan officer friend. And the attorney watching on video heard Grandpa say he never signed. This isn't drama. It's fact." He laughed, the sound hollow. Always so dramatic. Always the outsider who thinks she's the clever one. His words were sharp, but his eyes flickered toward the phone, measuring what I had already preserved. Grandpa stirred in his chair, half asleep, then his voice broke through in a tremor. "Don't sign any more, Colton. Don't force me." The words slurred but landed like stones. Colton's smile cracked. He looked back at me and said evenly, "Doesn't matter. Everyone knows you signed away your rights 4 years ago. That release form, it'll hold." I leaned in, voice calm but deliberate. "Funny you mention that. Harold Cho sent me the original draft last night with my name still in it, and he has the logs of when the so-called release appeared. Guess who didn't authorize it?" His smirk faltered, a shadow of unease creeping across his face before he masked it with a dry chuckle. "Fine," he said, tossing the paper back onto the table. "Then let the courts decide. We'll see who looks like the fool when the time comes." He whistled a short tune as he turned to leave, the kind of tune someone hums when they want to pretend they've won. But as he swung his leather bag over his shoulder, a folder slipped free, tumbling onto the floor. He didn't notice. When the door shut behind him, I picked it up. Inside was a photocopy labeled Caretaker Agreement. My eyes scanned the terms quickly. I would assume full responsibility for Grandpa's care costs while relinquishing any claim to property. The design was elegant, the trap ironclad. They meant to shove this in my face during some staged family intervention, corner me into signing under pressure. I held the document under the light and whispered to myself, "So this is the weapon." My chest tightened, not with fear, but with certainty. If they wanted a stage, I'd give them one. But it would be bathed in daylight, not shadows. The sunroom at Colton's house looked like it belonged in a magazine, spread glass walls opening to manicured lawns, vases of fresh-cut lilies, pitchers of lemon water set neatly on the buffet. On the wall hung a ceramic plaque painted in cheerful cursive. "Family is everything." I almost laughed when I saw it. They had arranged the space like a courtroom disguised as brunch. They ushered me to a chair in the corner, not at the table, but near the wall, as if to remind me I was here on their terms. I sat anyway, laying my file case on my lap. Sable took center stage, smiling wide as she dimmed the lights and flicked on a projector. "Before we begin," she said sweetly, "we thought it'd be best to remind everyone where priorities lie." The slideshow began photos of me in Austin at conferences, even candid shots pulled from old social media. Each image paired with captions that twisted truth into accusation. Here's Zephyr off chasing his career while poor Walter sat alone at Christmas. Another Zephyr enjoying city life, forgetting who made it possible. The audience was a mix of distant cousins, sympathetic neighbors, all nodding as though they were in on the judgment. I didn't interrupt. I let them run through every slide, every smile, every lie. Only when the final image froze on the screen, me stepping into an airport with luggage, did I stand. I plugged my laptop into the projector cord and replaced their story with my own, an email chain. The room fell quiet as the text appeared on the wall. Zephyr didn't attend Christmas because he found Walter left alone for 2 straight days without supervision. He demanded someone take responsibility. Murmurs rippled. I stepped closer to the table, setting down a small amber vial. This is Ativan. I found it by Grandpa's chair yesterday. The dosage was doubled. Who exactly decided sedation was the best form of care? My question cut the air cleanly. Faces stiffened. Colton shifted in his chair, jaw tight. Sable looked around, her smile wobbling. I pressed on. And one more thing. From my case, I withdrew the folder that had fallen from Colton's bag, the caretaker agreement. I opened it to the first clause and read aloud, Party A relinquishes all inheritance rights, assuming all financial liability for elder care. I let the words hang in the room. No one spoke. I snapped the folder shut. This is not care. This is coercion dressed as responsibility. And just so everyone knows, everything said here is being recorded into a pre-hearing affidavit. Clerk Albright from Gallatin County is right outside this window. I gestured to the glass where a suited figure stood discreetly observing. The silence thickened until Grandpa stirred. His eyes fluttered open, and in a whisper that sliced through the air, he said, "No more signing. Let him decide." The room froze. Every pair of eyes turned to him, then to me. Colton tugged at his tie, his composure cracking. "So what do you want, Zephyr?" His voice was low, sharp, almost a snarl. I straightened, steady and calm. "I want the truth. And Grandpa still has enough of a voice to tell it." The sun cut through the glass, glaring bright on the ceramic plaque above their heads. Family is everything. For the first time all afternoon, it sounded less like a motto and more like a lie waiting to collapse. The sunroom no longer looked like family space. It was a courtroom of glass and light. I laid out the folder I had guarded all night and spoke firmly. 6 months ago, my grandfather signed a power of attorney giving me full control of his health and finances. This overrides any paperwork you've forged. The seal gleamed under Montana sunlight. Before Colton could sneer, I presented a forensic ledger. Withdrawals from Grandpa's joint account matched expenses billed through his company, even the patio heater on his own deck. The clerk leaned closer, scanning the columns, every line a nail in Colton's coffin. He lunged to grab the sheets, but the clerk intercepted. "Already scanned," she said. His face flushed red. I drew out the trust amendment embossed with a law office stamp. "This names me Zephyr Maddox as sole heir." Sable shot to her feet, screaming it was fake. In reply, I hit play. Grandpa's video deposition filled the wall. "I want the house, the land, the memories to go to Zephyr. He is the one who stayed." His voice silenced the room. Colton pulled a folder of his own. "We have medical proof he wasn't competent." The clerk cut him down. "That form is invalid. No physician witness. Not admissible." Murmurs spread. I slid forward an email trail showing withdrawals tied directly to Granite Peak events. Whispers grew louder. Finally, Marina's voice carried from my phone, calm and unshakable. "This record supports an investigation for elder financial abuse." Colton slammed the table, shouting threats of lawsuits. The clerk stared him down. "You just admitted knowledge under affidavit." I sat back, breathing deep. The storm was no longer mine to contain, it was theirs to face. Chaos swallowed the sunroom. Papers scattered, water glasses tipped. I stood and raised a final envelope. "The lake house," I said. Colton stiffened, the word itself a weapon. He had treated it as his trophy, tucked into an LLC, left taxes unpaid. I unfolded the deed stamped with my name. I filed the lien. I bought it back. Silence cut sharp. Sable broke into sobs. Colton turned scarlet. The clerk entered it into record. Grandpa's fragile voice whispered, "You gave me my name back." Colton tried one last blade. "You schemed this all along, used him." I answered steady, "No. I just stopped staying quiet." A cousin rose pale, confessing she'd seen Colton shove papers in front of Grandpa just after he took his pills. Another blow to the mask. The clerk declared the evidence enough for criminal referral. Colton staggered, fury replacing charm, Sable clutching his arm. The stage they built was falling piece by piece. I gathered the documents into my case and looked at Grandpa. "From now on, no more performances. You'll have peace." His small nod sealed it. By afternoon, I sat in Gallatin County's record office. Fluorescent lights buzzed, the air smelled of dust and paper. I placed a black USB on the table. "Truth. BZN," I told the clerk. Inside was everything: the $20K note, the erased family photo, Griffin's group chat, the ledger, the amendment, the deposition. Preserved forever. Marina's voice came steady by video. Enough for charges of elder abuse and tampering. I signed the deposition with slow, deliberate strokes, each one final as steel. Out in the hall, Colton leaned against the wall, face red. "You'll regret this," he hissed. I met his eyes. "No, but you will." The clerk soon confirmed IRS had flagged his filings. Marina added, "Clients are preparing a class action." The fallout was expanding beyond family. Outside, cold air stung my face. A woman approached, pressed an envelope into my hand. "You don't know me. He scammed me years ago. Thank you." Inside was her contract and a letter of gratitude. This war was never just mine. It was bigger, and now it was breaking open. My mind was already at the lake house. Grandpa deserved to see it again, not in memory, but in life. The lake glowed gold under sunset. I wheeled Grandpa onto the reclaimed porch, the boards creaking like old friends. On the table sat a fresh chocolate cake, one candle flickering. I lit it. "Happy 80th, Grandpa." His eyes cleared, voice breaking through fog zephyr. I cut a slice, fed him gently. He smiled, not melting this time. Relief washed over me. We ate in quiet, only water lapping the shore. Inside, the old room was transformed. Paintings from veterans hung on the wall, wooden chairs in a circle, a cedar sign overhead, Willow Basin Retreat. On the corkboard, I pinned the woman's thank you letter, proof the fight had reached beyond bloodlines. My phone buzzed with 2 messages. Marina's email: "Colton in custody, charges filed. He cannot touch the estate." Then the POA: "Stands uncontested. You are sole guardian. Official." I looked at Grandpa. His hand found mine. "Thank you for not staying quiet," he murmured before sleep. That night, the candle flickered but held just like us. In the silence, I knew taking everything back was not revenge, it was restoration. And that, more than anything, was the legacy worth keeping. I never thought justice would come in the form of papers, recordings, and a USB drive. I used to imagine it as shouting matches, dramatic exits, or some lightning strike of karma. But what really brought peace was quieter, documenting the truth, refusing to sign away dignity, and holding my ground even when my own family called me dramatic or disposable. Coming back from my grandfather's 80th wasn't about celebration, it became about restoration. The melting cake, the deflated balloon, the $20K note taped to the fridge. Those weren't just signs of neglect. They were signs of a strategy to erase not only him, but me. And standing in that sunroom, facing their fake smiles and slideshow lies, I realized the only way forward was through evidence, through clarity, through the courage to speak. Taking everything back didn't mean I wanted revenge. It meant I wanted to give back what had been stolen: time, memory, legacy. Now the lake house isn't collateral for loans, it's a retreat for voices that were silenced. My grandfather's last birthdays won't be remembered by the lies others spun, but by the candle that didn't melt, the cake that held firm, and the voice that finally spoke my name again. That's the real inheritance. And if you're listening right now, I want you to know something. Silence only protects those who harm. Speaking up is hard, but it can change everything. Maybe your family tried to erase you. Maybe someone told you your voice didn't matter. It does. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe. It's free, but it means more than you know. It tells me I'm not alone in this, and it helps this story reach someone else who's waiting to be reminded that they too still matter. Leave a hi, or just let me know where you're from. I read every single one. Because sometimes the smallest connections carry the greatest weight. Thank you for listening, and thank you for standing with me.